In this US election, two powerful figures face off. Kamala Harris, poised to make history as the first female president, and Donald Trump seeking a rare second non-consecutive term. Their starkly contrasting visions for the future will define the race.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are competing in the US elections to rule two vastly different countries. As usual, the US elections will feature a candidate from the Republican Party and another from the Democratic Party. Thus, most policy differences between Harris and Trump reflect those of the dominant parties. Kamala Harris's economic policies closely align with the Biden administration. She acknowledges that prices remain too high and aims to foster an opportunity economy centered on the middle class. In contrast, Donald Trump advocates for reducing inflation through increased oil and gas drilling and deregulation. Trump has also criticized high interest rates, suggesting that the president should influence the Federal Reserve. On foreign policy, Kamala Harris's approach closely mirrors the Biden administration, which believes in maintaining global alliances, especially with NATO. Regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, she vowed unwavering support for Ukraine and criticized Putin's actions. In contrast, Donald Trump holds a more isolationist viewpoint, often criticizing global alliances like NATO and has suggested withdrawing from it. He plans to reassess US aid to Ukraine, claiming he could end the conflict in his first day in office without detailing how. Regarding the Middle East, Harris advocates for a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon while affirming Israel's right to defend itself. Trump positions himself as a supporter of Israel, proposing measures against pro-Palestinian protests, but has, however, critiqued Israeli tactics. Harris has vowed to maintain Social Security and Medicare benefits without cuts. Harris plans to raise taxes on individuals earning over $400,000 annually. She proposed increasing Medicare surtaxes to 5% for higher earners. In contrast, Trump claims he will not cut Social Security or Medicare benefits, but aims to eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits. Harris and Trump have contrasting approaches to immigration. Harris seeks to reshape the narrative by proposing stricter penalties for illegal asylum seekers and focusing on the root cause of migration. She supports immigration reform that offers citizenship pathways for undocumented individuals, especially those brought to the U.S. as children. In contrast, Trump emphasizes strict immigration policies, promising extensive deportations and the reinstatement of controversial measures from his first term, including revoking protections for undocumented individuals and ending birthright citizenship. Harris and Trump have starkly different views on climate change. Harris recognizes human activity as a major driver of the climate crisis and considers it a serious threat. She supported the Inflation Reduction Act and advocates for electric vehicle clean energy credits. In contrast, Trump has repeatedly questioned climate science, labeling it an expensive hoax. He prioritizes oil and gas for environmental issues and claims that renewable energy, especially wind power, negatively impacts wildlife and public health. Harris considers Trump a significant threat to democracy. She emphasizes her prosecutorial background to contrast with Trump, who has faced multiple felony charges. She also led efforts to pass federal voting rights legislation. In contrast, Trump made claims about the election fraud related to his 2020 defeat, refusing to commit to accepting the outcome of the 2024 elections. Facing federal charges for attempting to overturn election results, Trump plans to appoint loyalists and has threatened to use the Justice Department against political adversaries.
Now, The Telegraph has reported that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris offer starkly different visions on key issues. On foreign policy, Trump promises a more isolationist stance, criticizing NATO, while Harris champions NATO, global alliances, and robust support for Ukraine. Trump softened his views on climate change but opposes Biden's green policies, focusing instead on energy independence. Harris supports climate action, including renewable energy investments. Both candidates' approaches to the economy, Israel, and immigration present distinct paths toward for the US. Now, for more analysis, we're joined by Seth Tachner, an international relations expert from Los Angeles, to discuss the potential scenarios following the 2024 US elections, considering the implications of either Trump or Harris winning on global conflicts and economy. Good evening to you, sir. Hello. Hello? So, Mr. Tachner, how do Harris and Trump's foreign policies differ in terms of multilateralism vis-a-vis unilateralism? Can you hear me, Mr. Tachner? Hello. Right. I guess we're having. Mr. Tachner, I guess we are having a technical problem, and we're still on our coverage here to the U.S. election state. Right, and we're still here on our coverage while we're seeing some videos of the voting process taking place in some of the states in Nashville and Florida, as seen here, and the voting process is still ongoing there. We're also seeing the voters going to swing states, including Pennsylvania. This very strong and one of the key swing states, and we're also observing the voting process that includes the mail voting system, which is would be very much in question. And we're back to our coverage here. Right, for more analysis, we're joined again by Mr. Seth Chechner, an international relations expert from Los Angeles, to discuss the potential scenarios following the 2024 US elections, considering the implications of either Trump or Harris winning on global conflicts and economy. Good evening to you, sir.
Good morning from LA. Good evening.
Yes, good morning then. So, how do Harris and Trump's foreign policies differ in terms of multilateralism vis-a-vis the unilateralism?
That's an excellent question. I think probably, I think the case right now can probably most made what Mr. Trump's policies were basically based on, his past presidency from 2016 to 2020. More of an America First unilateralism policy and kind of a strong approach to different international relationships and perhaps a bit more aggressive with things like tariffs and trade wars. Perhaps serving American citizens in the short run, and perhaps more unpredictable. But I think in the case of Harris, it's not really entirely clear. She was vaulted into this spot just a few months ago when Mr. Biden's candidacy flagged. And I think for a lot of us here, it's a bit undefined, to be honest with you, even with her vice presidency. So I think that part's a little bit unclear in terms of what the strategy will be for her. But I think it'll probably be closer for him if he does succeed to what we saw in the prior presidency in terms of how he manages that.
Now, you spoke about America First policy of Mr. Trump during the 2020. Now, we're speaking of what long-term impact could Trump's America First policy have on U.S. leadership in NATO and the world body, the United Nations, for instance?
He's been clearly, a skeptic and bit of pushing on some of the traditional constraints that my country has been part of for many years. And I mean, it's not clear if he would sever, but he certainly has more of a very proactive policy towards paying your dues and not just having the U.S. support all the members without some form of consideration coming back. And I think that's a real worry, not only on the part of people who worked with him, but for those of us who are, big supporters of international relationships, engagement, and cooperation as a key to American foreign policy going forward. But I think it could be quite divisive in terms of how he approaches both of those interests if he does succeed in his second term. So people are concerned about that for sure.
Now, on the other hand, Mrs. Harris here, and how would Harris' emphasis on alliances, especially with NATO, shift U.S. foreign policy in Europe and Asia?
Well, again, she's a bit of an unknown commodity, at least to me. She's someone who I think folks have perhaps more grasp of what her domestic thinking is and what she's at least said in her campaign. I live in California, and she was Attorney General here, and I think there's a relative degree of familiarity and support for her here in California because she was in San Francisco for many years. I don't know if it's really clear yet in terms of how that would play out internationally. I mean, I think if one were to perhaps guess or extrapolate, maybe it wouldn't be so different from the Biden administration's approach. That's a guess because she said very forcefully, I'm on the ballot here, not him. But I personally wouldn't expect radical changes from how, President Biden and Secretary Blinken, and our foreign policy teams have approached matters internationally. That's just my personal view.
How would Harris and Trump's approach towards the Israeli war on Gaza affect the U.S. relations with the Middle East? And will they differ?
They probably would differ. I think, the former is probably more supportive and libertine and probably would allow Israel to quote unquote get the job done. I think those are the words that have been used. And I think you can look back to the past administration to see his record of support. I mean, Vice President Harris has been.
What, from your point of view, sir, do you think the meaning of what Mr. Trump said will have to get it done? What does this mean, or how would we expect that to mean?
I would expect there to be less pressure and probably, in terms of how he accommodates that going forward. But, I don't think it's entirely clear with how she would approach. She's been very, very supportive, but she's also sensitive to different, voting blocks here and different communities around the state. So I probably expect her to be a little more aggressive than what President Biden has been. Biden and the team, I think, have just given an ultimatum actually for the Gaza situation. So I think you'd probably see more proactive approach to managing it from President Harris or any Democratic candidate going forward.
Regarding the Iranian nuclear deal, how Trump's skepticism of the Iranian deal or the Iranian nuclear deal and Harris' support for rejoining it affect the U.S. Iran?
I think that's going to be a critical thing. I don't know what'll happen in the election tonight, but I do think that whether they renew that, support it, is personally something that I think is a very key thing for the region. But I think it's unclear. I really don't feel comfortable guessing on how it would work right now, or putting projections or it's for sure a key issue in terms of how they approach it.
Now, from your point of view, what could be the risks and benefits of Harris and Trump's differing approaches towards the Russian-Ukraine conflict?
I think, if you're looking at balancing global alliances that are emerging, I think the risk there, if it's not managed in a way that ultimately leads to peace and some balance in the region, you could have something more broadly, erupt, whether it's there or in other parts of the world like Taiwan. So I think I personally end that conflict as soon as possible. The candidate would move to that, actually. Yeah, the risk is not a fire to keep burning and could really unbalance things and cause a lot more harm.
Regarding the NATO and what strategic consequences could arise if Trump withdraws from the NATO compared to Harris' commitment to it?
I think there's a huge factor in terms of balancing those regions with America's Western European allies, basically, and their safety and the security and the troops that are there and the entire balance of regional economies that are sitting in Europe there. So I think pulling out of NATO would put a lot of those things at risk, actually. And I don't think this is an issue where either candidate is going to be quick to do something and do something in a very unpredictable way. I'm sure there'll be plenty of dialogue and communications with America's allies and even within our government, from our State Department, no matter in the White House. But yeah, I mean, similar to the last, just to answer you, that's a situation that needs to be managed and engaged actively. And the NATO alliance is something that I don't personally think one should walk away from so quickly.
Right. So that was Seth Tacharan, international relations expert from Los Angeles. Thank you so much for your insights. And we're continuing on. So we're continuing on with our coverage, and from Pennsylvania, we're joined by Qnews correspondent Rami Gabr with key battleground states closely watched.
Good evening.
Right, Rami, if you may let us aware a bit about the scene of the voting process so far and the turnout in this key swing state.
Yeah, now it's a little bit different in this. In this voting center in St. Luke, St. Luke is a church here in the center of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the biggest city of Pennsylvania state. Actually, from the early morning, there was a lot of line outside the voting center, and inside the center, at the end of the night, there is like it's massive voters here in this very small voting center in center Philadelphia, but they came early in the morning at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. before they are going to work, because today is a working day. It's not a holiday. So that they came early and then vote. After they vote, they go to work. And then some people that they couldn't vote in the morning, they came afternoon, maybe after 3, 4, or 5 p.m. even, and they vote until 8 p.m. when the voting centers close in this city, in this state of Pennsylvania.
If I may ask you here about the candidates' performance in this state's crucial battleground county. Hello, Rami, can you hear me? Rami, do you still hear me? Rami, do you hear me? Right, Rami, again, let me ask you about the candidates' performance in the state's crucial battleground.
Yeah, there is a lot to say about this state. You know, Pennsylvania is one of the biggest swinging states. It's the biggest swinging states actually, with 19 votes in the electoral vote. It's the fifth biggest state in the 50 states of the United States of America, with 19 votes. So it's the biggest prize for any candidate. So Trump want to win it. He want to re-elected, or like make his success in 2016 here in Pennsylvania, and he want to win it again because he's the only Republican nominee that won Pennsylvania in like more than 20 years. He did that in 2016. Also, on the other side, we can see Kamala Harris. She needs to win here in Pennsylvania and put with it like 2 more states from the blue wall, like Michigan and Wisconsin, or Wisconsin and North Carolina, so she can win this race to the House. So if you win Pennsylvania, you can win. It's like half the road to the White House.
Meaning it's a key swing state. Rami, if I may ask you here, I have some of the important questions that we need to discuss. Now, the voting by mail, because it's significant. So the voting by mail, does it threaten to compromise the integrity of the elections?
Actually, for Pennsylvania especially, it's a little bit different, because they didn't use here to vote by mail or to vote early by mail. It's like a new thing they are trying this election. But the thing is, there was a lot of problems actually. There were a lot of problems with voting early by mail. Some people, they like try to send requests to have back their ballots, but they didn't receive it. Also, there is some like violations happened in some counties. It's like 5,500 ballots requests were like suspicious, and the election authorities, they found them and they exclude them from the other requests, and that putting under control. But this actually opened the argument about how integral and how impartial the voting by mail, especially Pennsylvania, with is the governor of Pennsylvania. He's Democrat, and there is some like accusations from the Trump campaign and from Trump himself that he is like biased. Josh Shapiro is biased to his party, to his Democratic Party, and to the Democratic nominee Kamala Harris. That's what happened here, and this is how the experience was here in Pennsylvania.
Yes, thank you so much. That was Rami Gabr, Qnews correspondent. We thank you so much for being with us and for your and for, of course, your analysis here and reporting to the situation in Pennsylvania. Now let's take a look at this video.
Difficulty. We don't need that. So I think people saw that, and it just seems that the conservatives are voting very powerfully. Just finish it up. Go ahead. No, I feel very confident. I have felt. You know, we went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. So we'll see how it turns out. But it seems that they have really shown up in force. I just got a call from Dan Patrick in Texas. He said they've never seen anything like it. It's been very good.
Was there looking back, is there anything you would do differently about your campaign? Anything you regret about entering this campaign?
Look, regrets. You always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. Look, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
Sir, do you accept the possibility that you and Vice President Harris both might not get to 270 electoral votes by the end of tonight?
It should never happen. A thing like that should never happen. This election should be over. They spend all this money on machines. If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. It's crazy. They use these very expensive computers, and I'm hearing in Pennsylvania they won't have an answer till 2 or 3 days from now. I think it's an absolute outrage if that's the case. Now, maybe it'll be later, but it's paper ballots. In France, they went paper ballots because the mail-in was not working. It was corrupt. And in France, they went paper ballots. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, they had 37 million votes counted and done. They had a winner, they had a loser. And in this country, I mean, I'm just hearing that in certain states, it's going to be a long time, and it won't even be close. It won't even be that close. They say, I'm going to win the state, but it's going to take a long time to certify it.
Could you see a world where you don't declare victory tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing. I'm hearing states where I'm up by a lot, but they won't have a final number for a long time.
What are your plans for tonight in terms of watching the results and so forth?
So we're going to have a very special group of people, many of whom you know, and they'll be at Mar-a-Lago. In addition, we'll have 4,000 or 5,000 people at the convention center. On the assumption I win, I mean, I don't know if something else happens. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of declaring victory, but if in normal times I would go over to the convention center, let's say at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something, but I just don't know. It looks like we have a very substantial lead. It looks like we have many more Republicans voting today than Democrats, so if you have a lead and we have a bigger vote, that means you're doing very well, but they have to call a winner. They should, and they should call a winner, yes. Just stop talking about that. Go ahead. Oh, I don't know. I was honored to get Joe Rogan last night. I mean, Joe Rogan's a big deal. He's a very respected person. And I must tell you, Megyn was fantastic. She got up and said some things that were really pretty amazing. But before that, I just think we ran a good campaign. I had good policy. We want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. You know, we want strong borders, and we want people to come in. We want to be totally inclusive, but they have to come in. I think that was a big issue. To me, that was the biggest issue. I may be wrong. You know, a lot of people said inflation. Inflation's a disaster, but I think it's a second issue. I think the first is the border. We can't allow criminals to be put back into our country or to be put into our country. So you have 13,000 plus murderers allowed to roam in our country. Not going to be allowed. They have to go. You have drug dealers. You have terrorists. You have a tremendous amount of people that should not be in our country, and we need strong borders in this country. And I think people are voting. I think it's personally, I think it's a number one issue. We'll see how it pans out, but I think it's a number one issue. I don't have to tell them that. I don't have to tell them that there'll be no violence. Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence. Unlike your question, you believe in violence. Go ahead.
Where will you be looking early to see if you're having a good night or not? What's your goal?
Well, I think I'll be at Mar-a-Lago for the most part. We have a lot of political professionals. I'm going over now with Melania, who I'm very proud of. She's got the #1 bestseller. Can you believe that? He can believe it. But so we're very proud of the job she's done with that. Her book is #1. But we're going to go over to the office in West Palm, and we're going to say hello to the workers. They've worked very hard.
Will Georgia kind of be your first indication of whether it's going to be a good
I think so. I mean, I hear we're doing very well there in Georgia. I hear we're doing very well. I hear we're doing very well everywhere. Now, I may regret that statement, but I'm hearing that we're doing very well everywhere. Would you go louder? No, I haven't prepared a speech. No, I did speeches last night, all day long, all night long. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we left, and we did a lot of speeches. You can probably tell. No, I have to do that. I'm not a Democrat. I'm able to make a speech on pretty quick notice. If I win, I know what I'm going to say, and I don't even want to think about the losing part. I would like to tell all of the people that are online to stay online. We have tremendous Republican lines, and I've been asked actually to say it. It takes a while. I'd like to just make the statement that I'd like the Republicans to stay online. Democrats, if they'd like, they can leave. But I'd like the Republicans to stay online.
Any additional pressure today, given criminal cases against you that would proceed if you lost or go away?
I have no pressure whatsoever. I'm winning big cases. Those cases are all being won. The biggest case was the Florida case, and it's been won. I appreciate your nice question.
Sir, you and Mrs. Trump have been doing
No
this
pressure whatsoever.
for 9 years. Regardless of what happens tonight, is this your last campaign? Are you done after this?
I would think so. I would think so.
How do you feel about it?
Sad and very fulfilled. I think we're going to have a very big victory today.
Mrs. Trump, how are you feeling?
Very good, thank you. Thank you.
If you win, sir, if you win, do you have a plan in place to start naming staff and cabinet officers?
We're already a transition team, but I don't like talking about that until I find out how we do. I mean,
So, how does sort of threats from Iran and sort of assassination attempts sort of shape your thinking on stuff, right?
well, it doesn't. Look, we're not looking to do damage to Iran, but they can't have a nuclear weapon. That's so. My terms are very easy. They can't have a nuclear weapon. I'd like them to be a very successful country, but they just can't have a nuclear weapon.
Does it change the way you live, all the threats? And
Well, I think Secret Service has been a little bit tougher, to put it mildly. I see more machine guns than I've ever seen in my life. We're surrounded by, I feel very confident with Secret Service. I think they've stepped up. Look, for a long time, they didn't give us the help. They didn't give us the assets, as they say, the manpower, woman power. They didn't give it to us. And we'd have rallies, you saw the rallies, 50, 60,000 people, and I'd have less people than Joe Biden, who had 5 people show up, and I'd have 55,000 people show up, and I had fewer people than him. So they should have done a much better job. And frankly, the president should make a very strong statement to the outside world, because
How are you feeling about your team as you head into the last day?
I think my team is incredible. Look, they say it's the best run campaign they've seen. Some people said it's the best run campaign they've ever seen, but in order to make that stick, you have to win.
How do you feel compared to your past campaigns? Are you more confident now than you were about the team than you were in the last 2 races?
My team, I'm very confident in. Many of them are the same players. As you know, Susie, a lot of the people are the same players. They've been very good.
Mr. President, Oprah said at Harris's rally last night, quote, if we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible we won't be able to count the ballot.
Well, I think it's ridiculous. Oprah, I was on her last show, or one of her last shows, and they picked the biggest people and all of that, and made a big deal. And I'm disappointed. I think Oprah's become a major divider in our country. And I think, frankly, she should be ashamed of herself. And you know who else should be ashamed? Fox. Because I've seen Oprah on Fox about 50 times making the same statement. And I think it's a disgrace what Fox does, because everyone thinks Fox is so pro-Trump. They're not pro-Trump at all. They've put Oprah on all morning long. That's all I see is Oprah. And, I knew Oprah very well. She's been in Mar-a-Lago many times. Roger King had his funeral. That's the head of King World, which was Oprah's mentor, and Oprah chose the location. She said, Mar-a-Lago is the most beautiful place. Would it be possible to have Roger's funeral at Mar-a-Lago in the ballroom? We did it. The only time I've ever had a funeral there. And I think Oprah should be ashamed of herself to say that. She should be ashamed. She knows me. She wanted to run with me as the vice president. She was going to be the vice president. She wrote me a letter. It's in the book. And now she goes and makes statements like that. She's a divider. And Barack Hussein Obama is a divider too.
There are people who are concerned that you didn't concede the election in 2020 when you lost. They're concerned that if you lost this election, you wouldn't concede again. What do you say to those people?
I think they're crazy. If I lose an election, if it's a fair election, I'd be the first one to acknowledge it. And I think so far I think it's been fair. I think there's been a lot of court cases. Both sides are lawyered up. Thousands of lawyers are involved, thousands, can you imagine? And part of that is because we have too complicated a process. If we had a piece of paper, watermarked, you know that paper is more sophisticated now than computers. It's watermarked paper. You cannot, it's unbelievable what happens with it. There's nothing you can do to cheat. And it costs you practically nothing to run. Think of it. We spend hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on these campaigns. You could do it for 8% of the cost and have accuracy, and we wouldn't have to be worried about when is Pennsylvania going to announce. It's really a shame.
Last question.
Well, he knows exactly what, but that's only based on what RFK told. I don't think RFK wanted that. You're talking about Health and Human Services. Let me tell you, he's a great guy, RFK, and he's going to do pretty much what he wants as far as I'm concerned. He wants health for women, for men, for children, and I happen to agree with a lot of the things he says. The one thing I told him, and I've told you in speeches for the last 2 weeks, we got to keep him away from the liquid gold, because the liquid gold, we have more than any of it. It's called oil and gas. That one I'm going to handle. Well, I'd be honored to have him. Now, I haven't spoken to Howard about that, but look, if you think of it, he came in third, in running for president, right? He ran a very good race. He had obstacles. The Democrats just really unfairly put obstacles up, and hence Kennedy left the Democrat Party for the Republicans. Now, he's a very smart guy. He's a very caring guy. He's very popular, too. We get up and introduce him. The place goes wild. No, we love having him. And you know who else we love having? Elon. He's been great. And everybody, look, everybody. Getting Joe Rogan last night and Megyn Kelly. This is very inclusive. This is a movement. This is the greatest political movement in the history of our country. And even you people, and some of you are fair sometimes, but it's the greatest movement in the history of our country, and I've made that statement 1,000 times. It has never been challenged. It is the greatest movement, and we're going to make America great again. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. This way. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Come on. Come on, guys. Jack. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. How about you?
Well, welcome back. That was live from Florida, where Donald Trump, the Republican presidential candidate in the U.S. election, costs his voice. Florida is or was one of the key swing states used to be that was leaning towards Republicans or the red. Donald Trump in his press conference, or in a press conference answering some of the questions, said that he feels confident and that the Republicans showed up in force, and that was the best campaign he did. He also spoke about the results, or the maybe late results that could come because of the counting system, despite all the very sophisticated equipment used, and questioned the mail voting system. He also spoke about problems facing Florida, particularly of what concerns the immigration and how to deal with problems like violence, like machine guns. He described some of the actions that exist there as terrorism, and called on voters at large to stay online, and on his supporter particularly to stay online. He also lashed out at the coverage of some of media, and he said that he said very remarkably that he said if he went through a fair election and lost, that he would be the first to acknowledge that. And yes, still with our coverage here, and for more analysis, we're joined now from California by Ashraf Singer, world politics analyst. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And during her presidential campaign, did Kamala Harris manage to formulate a balanced vision for her immigration policy?
Actually, she wasn't. Yeah, this is one of her weaknesses. Point, in her campaign, compared to Trump. So she wasn't really clear because I think Kamala Harris, she was responsible as part of the Biden administration of the problem of the illegal immigrants. They were coming to the U.S. a long time ago, even though Trump, was behind, decision to build a wall between Mexico and America. But it was a bad policy, a failed policy. If you ask me what is the good policy, they should really move the wall to Mexico, the border of Mexico with other Latin Americans, and from there they can really work together with Mexico. So it seems to me this is like a case or an issue just to mobilize, the nationalistic, guys in Americans. They don't really accept immigrants more, because immigrants, they're gonna to take your jobs, and there are many crimes. But it seems to me, in terms of statistical results showing, that is legal immigrants to United States, they were doing and are doing very well in every corner here. In terms of economy, education, and other things.
We just heard Trump as we followed together, and from your point of view, he was one of the issues that he spoke about was immigration and dealing with problems in Florida. What kind of measures would he reinstate or implement to enhance border security and of course, issues that he spoke about, and how does he plan to address concerns about the asylum seekers?
So in federal system, each state had its responsibility of managing it is policy, or it is issues. But for the borders, bordering Mexico or other countries in, like Panama or Cuba. So this is a federal decision. So this is basically what Trump accused, the Biden administration. They were challenging, the state of Arizona, Texas, for letting, these guys, came in without kind of restrictions, to prevent them, particularly illegal immigrants. But in other words, the history of America, United States, we're accepting many immigrants, even legal immigrants, came from Latin America, either seeking asylum, seeking, protections. And I think, America will not solve this problem, because America still need people, to live here in the US. But the only things you need just to make sure that everyone he or she is coming gonna to produce something for this country. He or she has a clean record, no crimes. So this is, I think, one of the major issue that is, Kamala Harris couldn't really defend herself in front of the true believer of Trump, in front of red states, because these guys, they still have their own mind in terms of dealing with the immigration issues, but it's still immigration issue has two sides of humanitarian sides and political sides. So I hope that next administration can really fix this issue by rational means, not by rushed political means or just by nationalistic means.
Right. Let me here take you to the other side. And what kind of measures would Harris support to enhance border security while ensuring the humane treatment of individuals seeking asylum?
She declared many times that she sent, the law enforcement, to secure the borders, and she supported, the state, and they funded the state. And basically, one of her arguments that is once she proposed a bill in the U.S. Congress, Trump and his colleagues inside the Congress, they were against this bill, and they were stopping this bill, to be passed. And this was a major problem. That is Trump. Trump was really behind, stopping, this bill to be softly executed and try to put like a high degree of measurements for securing the borders.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you here about Trump's position on creating pathways for citizens for undocumented immigrants, and what criteria do you believe should be used here?
So basically, the argument about the Republican Party or Trump, and from his point of view, seeing the illegal immigrant, they are moving to United States just to support Democratic Party and increase the number of people that gonna to vote for Democratic Party, not for Republican Party. This is the first issue. But in terms of the asylum, the Homeland Security, they have like steps, like if you applying for a green card, applying for asylum, so you need just to follow the laws and the steps and the procedures, and by the end you can get your green card, or you can get your U.S. passport or the citizenship. The question here about the quality of people are coming to United States. So United States does need to fix it is immigration policy, like you're gonna to invite the good quality of people to be part of the U.S. Getting the citizenship and they live and work here in U.S., or just you accepting everybody is coming to the U.S. or he or she is coming to the U.S. This is the point of Trump. Trump saying, long time ago, United States accepting, everybody he or she is coming, crossing the border, he or she was or is crossing the border to be to enter the U.S. And frankly, the lottery system, that is already applied here in the U.S. And that system, of course, does not distinguish, or make that differences, between a good quality of person or a low quality of person in terms of education, for example. So that system is just a blind system to accepting, people to work and live in the United States, in
Right.
the US. And this is actually one of the major problem. But what I'm seeing, Trump actually in that interview in Florida, he's pretty disappointed. I see in his eyes, like he's very exhausted.
Actually, Mr.
Seems to
Singer,
me like
he said that he was very confident of, and that that the Republicans stayed in force. So remains to be seen here. Mr. Ashraf Singer, political analyst, we thank you so much for being with us and for your analysis. And definitely we are on with our coverage.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Right. Immigration remains a controversial issue that provokes strong arguments over border security, status of undocumented immigrants, and the path to citizenship.
The ongoing crisis in the US-Mexico border has grown increasingly complex in recent years. Driven by economic instability, violence, and the effects of climate change. These factors have fueled a surge in illegal migration, overwhelming border resources and heightening tensions in both nations. In response, both the US and Mexico have implemented a range of policies aimed at addressing the issue. The US has primarily focused on strengthening border security through increased personnel, advanced surveillance technology, and the construction of physical barriers. Additionally, recent efforts have prioritized collaboration with Mexico to better manage migration flows. On the political front, Republican presidential candidates have largely endorsed stricter migration controls. Many advocate for expanding border barriers, increasing funding for border patrol efforts, and expediting the deportation process for undocumented migrants. Figures such as former President Donald Trump continue to champion a hardline stance, framing it as essential to national security.
They said they tried to tighten it up a little bit just to because they have an election coming up. It didn't work much, but they forgot to tell you that they continue to fly big, beautiful Boeing jets right over the border with hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants landing in the Midwest and other places.
In contrast, Democratic candidates tend to support comprehensive immigration reform. They emphasize a more humanitarian approach, often proposing pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and addressing the root causes of migration. Vice President Kamala Harris, echoing President Joe Biden's policies, has advocated for humanitarian treatment at the border and increased diplomatic engagement with Central American countries.
I reject the false choice that suggests we must either choose between securing our border or creating a system of immigration that is safe, orderly, and humane. We can and we must do both.
As the 2024 election draws near, the border crisis remains a pivotal issue, shaping voter opinions and influencing campaign strategies for both parties.
And now we're joined from New York by Irina Zuckerman, International Affairs researcher. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you for
thank you so much for being with us. And how would Trump's mostly or modify visas programs to ensure that skilled workers can enter the U.S. while protecting American jobs, as he claims?
Well, frankly, that's one of the biggest questions about the Trump presidency. It wasn't a big focus of his first term. It was his first term was mostly focused on curbing illegal migration, and that's all he's been talking about this year. He has been mostly focused on the border security issue. He has not actually been talking about skilled workers program in general. That said, it is possible that he will likely revert to the approach of negotiating specific visa quotas on a bilateral level by engaging one-on-one with each country, for instance, with India, with Latin American countries, and so forth, without making, without pushing for general changes in law through Congress.
What, from your point of view, is, on the other hand, Harris' stance on legal immigration, and how does she propose to streamline the immigration process for those seeking to enter the U.S. legally?
Harris likewise has not made any major sweeping proposals. It is likely that she will probably push for some increase in skilled workers' visas, particularly in light of the shortage of American workers in some key technology areas, such as in AI chips production, where there's a major skills gap. But that is not has been a major priority for her. She has also mostly focused on illegal migration and border security resources and protection. That said, it is likely that she may try to work with Congress, depending on the makeup of the Congress, to make broader congressional changes. However, that has not been a push during the Biden administration. It has literally not been a major focus at all. There has been no significant effort in that regard.
Right. Regarding another file, which is employment, how do Harris propose to balance the needs of U.S. Employers for skilled workers with concerns about job competition for American citizens, meaning another discourse than the way of Trump or the protectionism way?
Well, I think the one key area which has been proposed by some members of Congress that she can support is by focusing on education and by attracting students and as well as lateral workers in the industries into additional training opportunities that could give them the skills they need to work for American companies, and also to provide incentives for companies to provide additional extended training for workers to enter some of the areas where there are significant shortages at the moment.
That was Irina Zuckerman, International Affairs researcher. We thank you so much for being with us here, and we move on with our coverage. And as Americans vote today, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris present starkly different economic visions. Trump advocates for tariffs and lower taxes, while Harris focuses on raising taxes for the wealthy and free trade. The election will shape the nation's economic future. Stay with us on our coverage for the US elections.
Election day kicks off. The economy is taking center stage as the most pressing concern for many voters. Let's now take a closer look at Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's economic strategies. Kamala Harris's economic agenda aims for sustainable growth through innovation, workforce skills, and climate-focused industries. Meanwhile, Trump's plan envisions a resurgence in manufacturing through reduced regulations and protectionism. Harris's main priority is to lower food and housing costs for working families by banning grocery price gouging, supporting first-time home buyers, and incentivizing housing supply growth. Trump, however, pledges to end inflation and make America affordable again by focusing on increasing oil drilling to reduce energy costs. Harris supports border security and a modest cut in immigration, predicting minimal effects on inflation and workforce supply. Trump argues that deporting undocumented immigrants would lower housing demand, but economists warn that import taxes and labor shortages could drive inflation. Harris seeks alliances with the EU and Canada through fair trade policies, enhancing labor and environmental standards. Trump supports protectionism, with 10 to 20% tariffs on most imports and tax incentives for U.S. manufacturing, while Harris criticizes this approach, favoring targeted tariffs like those on Chinese EVs. Harris supports raising the federal minimum wage and gig worker protection, while Trump proposes tax breaks for small businesses to drive job creation without wage mandates. Harris's plan focuses on job growth in green energy tech and in healthcare, whereas Trump emphasizes traditional manufacturing and energy sectors for faster job expansion. Harris plans to raise taxes on corporations and high-income earners while providing tax relief for families. She also proposes a moderate capital gain tax hike at 28%. Trump, on the other hand, suggests deep tax cuts, including corporate tax reduction to 15% and an extension of his 2017 tax cuts. Harris's economic proposals are projected to raise the deficit by $1.2 trillion by 2034. The Penn-Wharton budget model estimates that Trump's tax cuts and tariff strategies could expand the deficit by $5.8 trillion over the next decade.
I think it meant a lot. So all over the country, I hear it's all red, and we don't need that. You know, we went in with a very big lead, so we just had to sort of keep it, but I hear it's beyond that. And it's a movement. There's never been a movement like this, and we're going to turn our country around. We're going to not let people that murder people come into our country. We're not going to let drug dealers come into our country and terrorists come into our country. Little things like that, people are not going to stand them, and that's why we're doing well. But you know what? We still have a time to go, so let's make sure that we have this under control. And some of you I'm going to see tonight, I would imagine. I hope all of you. So I'll be seeing you tonight, and it'll be great. The First Lady's coming with us, and she's really impressed by the job you've done. Would you like to say something?
A great job. Thank you so much for all your support. And it was hard work. I know it's hours to hours, and I know how hard my husband is working non-stop. So thank you for all of your support. Great job.
Thank you. Yesterday and the day before, you actually reminds me, the day before too, we did a lot of rallies, and they're big ones. We did full rallies as opposed to, so we got in about 5 o'clock in the morning. We left Michigan. I think Michigan's going to be great, especially since we killed the biggest factory that ever going to, auto factory that I think anywhere at any time, which would have, destroyed them. And we did that without being president. So that was a big thing. But I think Michigan's going to be good. They're all looking really good. Susie, I can't think of anything, hearing any weaknesses. Right? What do you think of Susie? Would you say good? Well, we just wanted to come over and pay our respects. This is really great. And we're going to see you tonight, and hopefully they'll be able to get these expensive computers going. The reason you use computers is to make time so that it's like fast. You don't use them so that you have to come up with an answer 3 days later. And that's a little scary when they say, what are they doing? You use a computer because it calculates quickly. And you use paper because you save cost. But the paper turns out to be much quicker than the computer. There's something wrong with that, so we don't like that. But there are a lot of things that are happening in our country that have to be changed, and we'll do it, and we'll do what's right for the country. And I think that's why we're doing well. But let's see if we can close it out. But it would be, I just asked about it, wouldn't it be nice if after spending billions of dollars that they could have a computer give an answer by like 10 o'clock in the evening? Doesn't make sense, does it? Doesn't really make sense. It's crazy. Thank you very much. We'll see you later. Have a good day. And you're going to be watching, and they're going to be watching. Make sure there's no cheating, right? There's going to be no cheating. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I like that.
Right, and we're back to our coverage, and for more analysis, we're joined from Atlanta by Osama Sharibi, Director of Emory Economic Development Initiative, and Scott Smithson, a Professor of International Relations from New York. Good evening, both gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sunny Georgia.
Right. So we start with Mr. Osama. And what are the main differences in Harris and Trump's approach to job creation and employment?
Well, if we make a SWOT analysis of, to me, I'm sorry because I think Donald Trump. Let me start with Donald Trump, maybe much easier. So he focuses, let's say, the strengths of what he wants to do. He focuses on economic growth and deregulation. It's really interesting, very strong to do that. He wants to support domestic manufacturing and energy production. And the other thing which is really interesting is lower corporate tax rates. These are very strong. But the weaknesses actually of his plan is that there is a big increase, a risk of increase of inequality. There is a short-term focus on traditional energy and not on renewable energy. potential impact on public services, which is a big problem. Especially, he wants to cut actually the Obamacare, which is a problem.
No, sir, we're speaking now about a certain file, which is the job creation and the employment. We're not speaking about the economy at large. So, if you don't mind, how do you think, or what could be the difference between the approach of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris towards this very particular file?
Well, so let me say something about Kamala Harris. She wants mainly to focus on social equity and investment in public services and a huge, concentration on climate goals, which is really very interesting. However, this will lead actually to a potential higher debt. They will, in fact, bring also some possible tax burden on high-income earners. And also there is a risk of inflation. But the same thing is for Donald Trump, because the growth in green tech is almost impossible, and the tariffs of Mr. Trump will be a kind of tax, a kind of burden actually on the global connections of America around the world, and this is really a big drawback.
Right. We're speaking here again about the employment, which had its own effect on economy, the job creation, and the data of employment, which had lots and lots of effect on the economic status. Mr. Smith, or Mr. Scott, would you like to comment here on the question?
So my colleague Kuzan made some very good points. I would probably just also say, kind of consistent with his theme, one of the major issues that we will probably see is, if Donald Trump gets elected, what the pullback of the Inflation Reduction Act will be. This is obviously an area that I defer to my colleague more on. I focus a little bit more on foreign policy, but we will see divergence in economic approaches depending upon who wins the election today.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Osama, again, how effective will Harris' measures to lower food and housing costs be in controlling inflation? Hello? Can you hear me, Mr. Osama?
Making imported goods more expensive, actually. Are you talking here about Kamala Harris, aren't you?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. We're speaking here about measures that she would be taking regarding the food, lowering prices and how to control the inflation.
So I do think that there is a risk of increased social spending could contribute to inflation and potentially affecting cost of living stability, and that's a big problem. That's one of the biggest weaknesses of focusing on that. However, it maybe help the middle class, but when it comes to the economy in general, it can have a big impact. But this is a policy that she's choosing, and a lot of people maybe like that, like Paul Krugman, who is a great economist, thinks that's a good thing because he thinks that the risk of inflation is not that big, even if it is problematic. It can have also a good side of it, because not all inflation is bad.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Mr. Scott, how might Trump's tariffs impact inflation and the U.S. economy at large?
Yes, this is a good question, and directly related to a foreign policy issue of how either candidate will engage with China. We've seen some protectionist measures already in the Biden administration. So, for example, 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. But President Trump has gone on the record saying that he would use significant levels of tariffs and increased protectionist measures. Now, if, as any of my colleagues who study economics will tell you, tariffs may be effective to some degree, but in the long term, they can actually be self-defeating, leading to irregularities in markets, but also leading to increased costs and prices for consumers. So again, at the end of the day, the cost that can come from high tariffs will eventually go down to consumers themselves. And
Right.
that is not necessarily an economic outcome that anyone wants.
Indeed. That was Osama Sharibi, director of the Emory Economic Development Initiative, and Scott Smithson, professor of international relations. Thank you both, gentlemen, for your analysis here. And we're continuing on with our coverage on Q News. Right, welcome back to our coverage. And as Americans head to the polls on Election Day, the focus on democracy, voting rights, and the integrity of the electoral process has never been more urgent, with former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris competing for the White House. The debate over election security, access to voting, and the legitimacy of results has intensified. And for more analysis, we're joined from Georgia by Lori Watkins, advisor to former U.S. President Barack Obama. Welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And given the importance of swing states in the U.S. electoral system, how do you see key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Florida, and Michigan shaping the outcome of the 2024 elections?
Well, I'm here in one of the battleground states of Georgia, and I can tell you that the enthusiasm here is extremely exciting. Today is election day, so what we are doing is making sure we are knocking on all those doors, chasing anyone who we have on our list that say they haven't voted yet. Early this morning, I've knocked on almost 75 doors. A lot of those people, they already said they voted. They were in line at 7 a.m. They were able to get it done very quickly. But we are seeing some lines across the country in the people that waited for election day that are waiting in long lines, but we know they're going to stay in line. We have our voter protection teams on the ground. We have lawyers that are ready, but we haven't heard or seen of any issues yet. And all of these battleground states are crucial. They are all within like 3-point margins. So it's going to be a very, very close race, as you all are very well aware. But we are very confident, extremely confident. The only state that I am a little worried about, if you will, is the state of Arizona and, of course, Pennsylvania. Everything is going to come down to the state of Pennsylvania and those votes. You saw Kamala Harris in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia. She was hosting virtual rallies in about 7 different locations across the country, and Georgia was one of them. So we're extremely positive, enthusiastic, and we're going to win.
But let me here ask you, there have been allegations faced by Donald Trump of voter suppression and fraud in battleground states like Pennsylvania, since you mentioned Pennsylvania. What measures should be in place to ensure that all eligible voters can cast the ballots without fear of intimidation or this frictionism? And how do you view measures that should be taken in this regard?
Well, as I had said about our voter protection teams, I can only speak for the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz campaign. We have voter protection teams here in the office, for example. We have them on the ground. They are easily deployed. People have our phone numbers. So if there is an issue that they want to run up the chain, they know who to call. But we have not yet heard of any issues of voter suppression. Now, in some of these states, battleground states that have Republican-led legislatures, you can call it whatever you want. I call it voter suppression, which, like in the state of Georgia, for example, the Republican-led legislature decided that the weekend that just preceded us, early voting ended on Friday. So when you eliminate the opportunity for people to vote on a Saturday or Sunday, all those working people, that makes them that much more difficult for them to be able to vote. So that's why we're pushing people today and making sure that even though they have to work and it's a Tuesday, that they made a plan to vote. And if they have to wait in line, that they're prepared to do so, that they bring water, that they bring snacks, that they wear the appropriate clothing. If it's raining in some states, that they bring an umbrella or a rain jacket. We want to make sure that people do not get out of line. Every single vote is crucial. But across the country, we feel confident with the teams that we have in place and those lawyers that can easily be deployed. Misinformation and disinformation, if you want to talk about that, the Trump campaign has been very aggressive in those measures and that vocalizing that, putting lies out there that people that are not citizens are able to vote, which we all know that's not true. And that's not happening here. And we haven't even received one instance or one reported case of that happening. So that's disinformation. Voting is for people who are registered to vote and are U.S. citizens. They have the right to vote. They are eligible to vote. But if they didn't register in time, unfortunately, in some states, you cannot register on election day. In some states, you can. So make sure you have a plan. Make sure you know the rules in your state, and go to iwillvote.com for any information. That's where you can find out your polling precinct. You can find out the hours of voting, etc. So all the information is there. People just have to do their research.
Yes, thank you so much. That was Larry Watkins, advisor to former President Barack Obama. We thank you so much for being with us and for your definitely insights here. And hopefully everything goes in favor of the U.S. nations. I guess that wraps up our coverage up for this this coverage, and we're still on with our coverages on top of every hour, and with our news. Now we'll just take a very short break going on to see more news, and we'll get back with our coverages that will continue for the whole night. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned.